Come and listen to my story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude. Oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. Kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said California is the place you ought to be, so they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly.
Welcome back to another edition of Components Breakdown. Today we are going to take a brief look at Black Gold, which is Fantasy Flight Games' re-implementation of the 1999 release entitled Giganton. Black Gold takes place in the year 1922, when the Texas oil boom was in full swing. In the game, 2 to 5 players will compete to secure the most wealth by the end of the game by claiming the best wells, bidding wisely against their competitors in the auctions, and selling their oil at the highest possible prices. In order to secure wealth in the game, players will explore the territory's terrain, surveying as many possible dig sites as they can, all in preparation for the construction of oil derricks that provide the greatest yield. Let's take a look at the game's components and setup. Black Gold features 2 main playing surfaces, the trackboard and the map tiles. First, the trackboard consists of 2 main sections, those being the railroad tracks, which mark the location of the oil baron and each of the players' trains, and the 3 oil companies where players will participate in auctions in order to win the right to sell their oil for that turn. Second are the 6 map tiles, which make up the terrain of Texas, and are double-sided and fully modular, allowing players to customize the game to their own liking, although there is a suggested setup at the back of the game's rulebook. Each of the map tiles contain a specific number of markings that denote such locations as oil wells, and specific landscape features such as rough terrain and hills, all of which will present important strategic choices for each of the players as they move throughout the game board. During the setup, players will randomly place the provided well markers face down on top of the individual well locations on the map tiles. The image on the back side of the well marker corresponds with the specific type of well that it is being placed upon, being either a single, double, or triple rig, while the hidden image on the face of the well marker indicates how many units of oil that the well actually yields to a player who constructs a derrick over that location. To begin, each player will receive $15,000 and a reference sheet, as well as a truck and 5 derricks of their player caller. The truck will be used to scout and survey these face-down well tokens, while the derricks will mark those constructed sites where the player chose to build, gaining a specific number of oil plumes based on the number that was revealed. The last set of components are the game's set of cards, which include the sales license, standard action, and special action cards. The sales license cards represent your claim strength and may be accumulated from round to round and are used for bidding on the right to sell oil at the various oil companies during the game's auction phase, noting that the deck's 104 cards are evenly split between those with a value of 1 and those with a value of 2. The standard and special action cards are what drive the majority of the game's mechanics, and are chosen by each of the players in turn order at the start of a game round. Action cards determine everything from the number of sales license cards that a player will receive during that turn to how many movement points they have available to them, as well as any additional bonus effects that are listed at the bottom of the card. Let's very briefly look at the gameplay. Black Gold is played in a series of rounds, each of which consists of 8 total steps that always occur in order. Again, the object of the game is to accumulate the most wealth before the game ends, which is denoted at the exact moment that the Black Oil Baron's train reaches the last spot on his train track. Now, to summarize how a round works, let's quickly go through each of the 8 steps. First, the starting player will adjust the oil prices of all 3 companies by rolling the provided die and determining whether each company's going rate increases or decreases for that turn. Second, the start player will turn over and reveal 1 special action card and X number of standard action cards, where X is the number of players participating. The first thing that will take place during this second step is that the players will move the oil baron train a specific number of spaces along the track that are depicted on the revealed special action card. Now, this movement by the oil baron provides a sort of in-game timer that pushes the game forward. Once all the cards are revealed, each player in turn order will choose one of these cards, taking it from the available options and placing it face up in front of them. The third phase allows each player to receive a number of sales license cards equal to the number shown on the action card that they chose for that round of play. Fourth, in turn order, players will perform a variety of different actions during the step, including moving their truck on the map tiles, surveying wells, building an oil derrick, advancing their train on its track, and performing any other special actions that are denoted on the action card that they chose. Now, that's quite a lot to initially take in, but in reality, this step is actually quite simple. Let's take a closer look at some of these available options. Movement in the game is broken down by the player's action card and can range anywhere from 4 to 14 depending upon the player's chosen card. Movement points can be split between a player's truck and a player's train as they so choose. However, there are some simple rules to acknowledge. Now, for example, some squares on the map tiles cost more points of movement depending upon the train that they move over. Likewise, some spaces on the train track cost additional points of movement to progress their train. And when it comes to building an oil derrick itself, some derricks simply cost more money depending upon the number of rigs pictured on the marker's face-up side. There are also 5 unique special actions that a player may perform at the end of their turn, which include everything from pushing all the other players' trains back an X number of spaces to building an extra derrick for that turn. However, these once again are only allowed when dictated at the bottom of a player's chosen action card. The fifth phase involves each player extracting and transporting their oil to the oil companies by removing one oil plume from each of their available derricks, removing any derricks off the board that no longer produce oil. Now, the trick here is that this process is free of charge for each player whose train is on the same row or further along the tracks than their furthest derrick. However, if this is not the case for a player, then they must either discard the oil plume that they pulled off their derrick or pay the player with their train furthest along the tracks $3,000 in order to transport that oil plume to one of the 3 companies. Once the oil is removed and paid for as needed, in turn order, each player will place any number of their available plumes into the tanks of their color at the companies of their own choosing. During the 6th phase, using their available sales licenses, players will bid on the right to sell their stocked oil for the current listed price by performing an auction at each of these 3 oil companies in order. Once the auction phase has concluded, each player is then required to discard any oil in excess of 2 plumes at each of the 3 available oil companies. This is the 7th phase and is entitled Check for Overflow. The final phase of a game round simply sees the market die pass to the player on the left to begin another round of play. And this kind of turn structure will progress from round to round until the oil baron's black train reaches the last spot on his track. Black Gold is a bit of an oddity of a game because it doesn't quite fit into the normal FFG mold that consumers have become so accustomed to now. It doesn't have the extravagant production values nor the fanciful themes which have made the publisher such a recognizable force in the industry. But on the other hand, it's also very refreshing to see them start to branch out into territory that they typically do not cover with their games. And just over the past year alone, we've seen more and more releases that cater to different types of audiences, with titles like Constantinopolis and Olympus to name just a few. Despite the publisher, though, what really boils down to in the end is whether or not the game stands on its own 2 feet. And Black Gold, although mostly simple to teach, learn, and to even play, is really a very solid and satisfying auction bidding style game with a theme that really does match its gameplay. What bothers me most about this game, though, isn't the actual gameplay, but that it doesn't have the usual wow factor with its components and pieces like most FFG games in the market. And experienced gamers may choose to pass on this title without giving it a proper chance, which is really a shame. But for those who do take a chance, I think that they will discover that the game provides a lot of good strategic choices when dealing with exploration, expansion, and movement, as well as when to bid heavy and when to hold off. Almost every game option, variable, and phase seems to offer an advantage at specific times over others, which creates a real sense of balance for me to the game. For instance, although the starting player does have the first option for choosing a very powerful action card during their turn, the subsequent players are almost always at an advantage during their movement, surveying, and even selling phases, allowing them time to dictate their own choices based upon the decisions of other players. And this can be a powerful tool in almost all the game's decisions. There is also a wealth of optional rules that are included that can either shorten or extend the game, increase the overall challenge, give inexperienced players a handicap, or even reduce the randomness of well distribution so that players can find the perfect mix of mechanics that fit their particular group. In all honesty, this is not the typical kind of game that I personally seek out to review, but I came away from the experience with a greater appreciation for a game that I approach with almost no prior knowledge, and I can definitely recognize a good game when I play one, and Black Gold is just that, a well-designed if not underrated game that I believe will appeal to players of all experience levels. So that is Black Gold. I am Jeremy Salinas, and thank you very much for watching.